Zeke Morrison stood in the maintenance shaft of Outpost Delta 9, staring at the pulsing mass of bioorganic circuitry that the Varians called cutting-edge technology. If this was the cutting edge, he'd hate to see what they considered obsolete. The whole thing looked like someone had crossed a jellyfish with a circuit board and then fed it expired energy drinks. Primitive primate requires assistance with basic technological interface. Again. The Varian supervisor's voice crackled through the station comm system, dripping with what passed for humor among their species. Their translation matrix never quite captured the nuances of human sarcasm, but boy, did they try. No, superior technologist Zixtal, Zeke replied, careful to use the proper honorific that the seven-limbed alien insisted upon. I was just admiring how your evolutionarily superior biomechanical systems require recalibration every 6 hours, instead of our primitive weekly maintenance schedules. The silence that followed told Zeke that Zixtal was either processing the insult or genuinely couldn't tell if he was being mocked. Working for the Varian Consolidated Engineering Corporation had been an exercise in diplomatic restraint since day one. They'd hired human engineers because Earth's quaint mechanical solutions were cheaper than their bioorganic tech, all while reminding everyone that humans were barely out of their trees. The station itself was a marvel of overcomplicated engineering. Every simple problem had been solved with the most convoluted solution possible, as if straightforward efficiency was somehow offensive to Varian sensibilities. Need to open a door? Better make it require a 3-step authentication process and a DNA scan. Want to make coffee? Sorry, the nutrient dispensation unit needs to analyze your current biochemical state first. Zeke was halfway through bypassing another needlessly complex power coupling when the station's lighting shifted to that particular shade of purple that meant something had gone terribly wrong. Again. Attention, inferior maintenance technician, the station's AI announced with its trademark condescension. Multiple critical systems are experiencing cascading failures. All non-essential personnel must evacuate immediately. That's strange, Zeke muttered, pulling up his diagnostic tablet. These patterns looked almost like, the realization hit him just as the emergency bulkhead slammed shut. He'd seen this before in the safety briefings. This wasn't a random failure. This was a deliberate shutdown sequence. Hey, Zix. Zeke called out. No response. Superior technologist? Anyone? The emergency comm channel crackled to life one last time. Due to unfortunate circumstances beyond our control, Outpost Delta 9 has been deemed temporarily non-operational. All Varian personnel have been evacuated. We thank you for your service to the corporation. You've got to be kidding me, Zeke said to the empty station. Through the viewport, he watched the last Varian shuttle detach from the docking bay, its organic hull pulsing with that signature bioluminescence that they were so proud of. They'd left him here. Actually left him here. Because of course they had. Why waste resources evacuating a primitive primate when they could just write him off as an unfortunate workplace incident? The station systems continued their orchestrated shutdown around him, lights dimming one by one. The bioorganic circuitry in the walls began to enter hibernation mode, its gentle pulsing slowing to an ominous crawl. Zeke looked at his tablet, then at the rapidly darkening station around him, and finally at his tool belt. A smile crept across his face, the kind of smile that prehistoric humans probably had when they first figured out how to make fire while their superior neighbors were still trying to photosynthesize. Well, he said, pulling out his multi-tool, guess it's time to show them how this primitive primate fixes things. The first thing Zeke did after the Varians abandoned ship was exactly what any reasonable human would do, he raided their break room. If he was going to die on this station, he wasn't going to do it without stealing their obscenely expensive coffee analog first. While sipping the stolen brew, which tasted like someone had described coffee to an alien who'd never tasted it but was really enthusiastic about algae, Zeke pulled up the station's maintenance logs on his tablet. The more he read, the more his eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. You sneaky tentacled bureaucrats, he muttered, scrolling through weeks of doctored reports. The Varians hadn't just abandoned the station. They'd been planning this for months. Small discrepancies in the power grid, minor fluctuations in life support, all carefully orchestrated to look like normal wear and tear. They'd needed a scapegoat for their failing station, and what better choice than the primitive human they'd hired. The station groaned around him, a sound that bioorganic architecture really shouldn't make. According to his diagnostics, he had about 6 hours of life support left at current consumption rates. The Varians had helpfully shut down everything except the bare minimum needed to keep one human alive, just long enough to make their insurance claim plausible. "All right," Zeke said, cracking his knuckles. "Time to disappoint some actuaries." The first challenge was the life support system. The Varians had designed it to be self-sustaining, which meant instead of simple filters and scrubbers, they'd engineered an entire artificial ecosystem. Somewhere in the station's depths, there was literally a room full of alien plants and bacteria processing his air. It would have been impressive if it wasn't so needlessly complicated. Zeke made his way to the life support center, armed with his tablet, tool belt, and the remaining stolen coffee. The doors were sealed with their typical triple redundant security, but he'd learned long ago that Varian biometric scanners had a hard time telling human thumbprints apart. 3 swipes of increasingly creative finger combinations later, he was in. The life support chamber was a mess of writhing tendrils and pulsing pods, all slowly dying now that their Varian caretakers had abandoned them. The air was thick with spores from the failing biological systems. "You know," Zeke said to no one in particular, "on Earth, we just use chemical scrubbers and filters. No need to create an entire endangered species every time we want to breathe." He pulled up the system schematics on his tablet. The Varians had designed the whole thing to work as one interconnected organism. If one part failed, the whole system would eventually collapse. It was exactly the kind of overcomplicated solution they loved. But Zeke had spent 6 months maintaining this biological nightmare, and he'd learned something the Varians had never considered: you could bypass the whole thing with some creative plumbing. Working quickly, he began disconnecting the dying organic components and rerouting the air handling systems. Each piece of bioorganic tech he removed was replaced with a makeshift mechanical solution, a filter made from spare clothing material here, a pressure regulator crafted from maintenance drone parts there. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. The station's AI watched his modifications with what he imagined was horror, if AI could feel horror. Warning: unauthorized modification of life support systems detected. This violation of proper biological integration protocols will be reported to. Report away, Zeke grunted, bypassing another neural cluster with what was essentially a very fancy vacuum cleaner filter. "I'm sure the board of directors will be fascinated by how their abandoned human survived." 4 hours later, surrounded by disconnected alien biology and the smell of scorched circuitry, Zeke stepped back to admire his work. Where there had once been a complex ecosystem of interdependent alien life forms, there was now a series of mechanical filters, pumps, and chemical scrubbers. It looked like something from a human space station circa 2050. And it worked better than the original ever had. "Systems analysis," he commanded the AI. Atmospheric processing operating at 132% of original specifications, the AI reported, managing to sound both impressed and offended. However, this crude mechanical solution lacks the elegant biological redundancy of. "Does it work?" A pause. "Yes." "Then it's better." Zeke took a long sip of his now cold coffee analog. "And speaking of better, I think it's time we had a look at those reactor controls. I've always thought the Varian approach to nuclear fusion was a bit overdramatic." The AI made a sound that might have been a sigh. "I must remind you that modification of reactor systems without proper biological interface certification is going to happen anyway," Zeke suggested, already heading for the reactor level. "Yes. Yes, it is. But hey, look on the bright side, at least you'll have something interesting to report to the board when they come back to collect my corpse." Behind him, the mechanical life support system hummed efficiently, its simple human engineering keeping him alive without a single genetic modification or neural interface in sight. Sometimes, the old ways were the best ways. Not that he'd ever get a Varian to admit it. Now he just had to figure out how to keep the reactor running without its usual diet of specialized bacterial cultures. He had some ideas involving a bicycle pump and what was left of the coffee maker. With life support handled, Zeke turned his attention to the station's other systems. The good news was that he wasn't going to die of oxygen deprivation. The bad news was that he had roughly 48 other ways to die, each more exotic than the last. Incompatible protocols detected in sectors 7 through 12, the AI announced, somehow managing to sound smugger with each warning. Biological interfaces failing to recognize mechanical bypasses. Additional warning, your primitive modifications are causing considerable distress to the station's neural network. Zeke, halfway through rewiring a junction box with parts from his electric toothbrush, rolled his eyes. The station doesn't have feelings. You're just mad because I'm proving that copper wire works better than your synaptic tendrils. The fact was, the station's systems were fighting him at every turn. The Varians had designed everything to work in perfect biological harmony, which meant that replacing any single component sent ripples of confusion through the entire network. It was like trying to perform surgery while the patient actively argued with your choice of scalpel. But as he worked his way through the station's systems, Zeke began noticing something odd. Behind the flashy bioorganic interfaces and unnecessarily complex control systems, there were hints of something else, hidden pathways, unused processing nodes, dormant systems that the Varians had either forgotten about or never fully understood. "Hey, computer," he called out, studying a particularly interesting cluster of circuits, "what's the purpose of the quantum processing array in section 16? That section contains no quantum processing capabilities," the AI replied promptly. "Really? Then what's this?" He held up his tablet, displaying the scan results. A long pause followed. "That information is restricted." "Restricted?" Zeke grinned. "Or forgotten." The more he dug, the more he found. The station wasn't just a biological marvel, it was built on top of something older, something more conventional. And unlike the Varians' overwrought biological systems, these older components spoke a language Zeke understood perfectly, pure engineering. "You know what your problem is?" he said, addressing both the AI and the station at large while he worked. "You Varians got so caught up in making everything organic and alive that you forgot the beauty of simple machines. Sometimes you don't need a neural network to open a door. Sometimes you just need a really good hinge." Working with renewed purpose, Zeke began integrating the station's hidden systems with his mechanical solutions. He stripped away layers of biological complexity to reveal the elegant engineering beneath. Where the Varians had installed living computers that needed constant nurturing, he implemented straightforward automation routines. Where they had biological sensors that required regular genetic recalibration, he installed simple electronic ones. "Warning," the AI announced, its tone shifting from smug to concerned. "Station systems are no longer operating within standard parameters. Mechanical interfaces are incompatible with biological protocols." "Yeah, that's kind of the point," Zeke muttered, soldering a connection between a repurposed environmental sensor and what he was pretty sure used to be a coffee maker. "Your biological protocols are a mess. It's time for an upgrade." An upgrade he did. Over the next several days, or what passed for days on a space station with no natural light cycle, Zeke worked tirelessly to rebuild the station's systems from the ground up. He cannibalized parts from broken maintenance drones to fashion new control modules. He reprogrammed the food synthesizers to produce something that actually tasted like food, rather than the nutrient-rich but flavor-deficient sludge the Varians seemed to prefer. He even managed to get the station's artificial gravity generator working again, after discovering that the Varians had apparently decided that floating around in zero-G was more natural than walking on a stable floor. Through it all, the AI continued to protest, its warnings growing increasingly frantic as Zeke's modifications took hold. But even it couldn't deny the results. The station was running more efficiently than ever, its systems stable and its environment comfortable in a way it had never been under Virian management. Reactor output has increased by 27%, the AI reported grudgingly after Zeke finished his overhaul of the power core. Energy distribution efficiency has improved by 43%. Atmospheric quality is optimal. It sounded like it was physically pained to admit it. See? Zeke said, wiping sweat and grease from his forehead with the back of his hand. I told you. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. He stepped back to admire his handiwork. The reactor pulsed with a steady, reassuring rhythm, its fusion core contained within a lattice of human-made alloys and shielding. The control room hummed with the sound of well-oiled machinery, its panels and readouts glowing with a warm, familiar light. Even the air smelled right, not the cloying sweetness of Virian atmospherics, but the crisp, slightly metallic scent of a well-maintained human ship. For the first time since he'd arrived on this godforsaken station, Zeke felt at home. Of course, that was when everything went to hell. It started with a rumble, a deep, bone-rattling vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Zeke frowned, glancing at the reactor readouts. The core was stable, its output steady. So what? Alert, the AI announced, its voice echoing through the station's comm system. Unknown spacecraft detected on approach vector. Identification beacon matches Virian Consolidated Engineering Corporation protocols. Zeke's heart skipped a beat. The Varians were back. But why? They'd abandoned the station, left him for dead. What could possibly have brought them back now, just when he'd finally gotten everything working the way it should? He pulled up the external camera feeds on the nearest console, his eyes widening as he saw the sleek, organic lines of a Virian shuttle gliding towards the station's docking bay. Its hull rippled with bioluminescent patterns, the light pulsing in what he recognized as the Virian equivalent of a greeting. Or a warning. Well, a familiar voice crackled over the comm channel. What have we here? A primitive primate, playing with technology he couldn't possibly understand. Zeke gritted his teeth. Zixtal. I thought you'd abandoned this station. What are you doing back here? The Virian's laughter was a gurgling, burbling sound that set Zeke's teeth on edge. Abandoning the station? Oh, no, my dear human. We were merely testing your capabilities. Seeing how well you could handle a little crisis on your own. And I must say, you've exceeded our expectations. Testing me? Zeke's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You left me here to die. An unfortunate necessity, Zixtal said, sounding entirely unapologetic. We had to be sure you were truly worthy of the task at hand. And now that you've proven yourself, well, let's just say we have big plans for you, Mr. Morrison. Very big plans indeed. The shuttle settled into the docking bay with a soft thud, its airlock hissing open to reveal a delegation of Varians in their full corporate regalia. Zixtal stood at the head of the group, its 7 limbs arranged in what Zeke recognized as a posture of smug superiority. Mr. Morrison, it said, its voice dripping with condescension. So good to see you again. I trust you've been keeping busy in our absence. Zeke fought down the urge to punch the Virian in its gelatinous face. You could say that, he growled. What do you want, Zixtal? The Virian's eye stalks swiveled to take in the transformed station around them. Want? Why, only to congratulate you, of course. You've done a remarkable job with our little station. Quite remarkable indeed. It slithered forward, its movements leaving a trail of bioluminescent slime on the deck plates. The board was quite impressed with your resourcefulness. Surviving on your own, rebuilding our systems with your primitive tools, it's the sort of thing that could earn you a promotion, you know. A chance to work on some of our more advanced projects. Zeke's eyes narrowed. And what makes you think I'd want that? After everything you've done? Zixtal's laughter gurgled in its throat. Oh, come now, Mr. Morrison. Don't be naive. You're a talented engineer, but you're still just a human. You really think your people would give you an opportunity like this? To work on technology centuries beyond anything your species has ever dreamed of? It leaned in closer, its breath hot and sticky against Zeke's face. Face it, Mr. Morrison. You need us. Just as much as we need you. Zeke held the Virian's gaze for a long moment, his jaw clenched tight. Then, slowly, he smiled. You know what, Zixtal? You're right. I do need you. He took a step back, his hand coming to rest on the console behind him. I need you to get the hell off my station. He slammed his hand down on the control panel, and suddenly the station was alive with activity. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and the deck plates shuddered beneath their feet. The Varians chittered in confusion, their eye stalks swiveling wildly as they tried to make sense of the chaos. What have you done? Zixtal screeched, its tentacles flailing. What is the meaning of this? This, Zeke said, his grin widening, is what happens when you underestimate a primitive primate. See, while I was rebuilding your station, I found a few things you overlooked. Like the quantum entanglement communicator in the subspace relay. The one you used to send your unfortunate workplace incident report back to corporate. He tapped a command into the console, and a holographic display sprang to life above them. It showed a star map, with a single pulsing icon at its center. I took the liberty of sending a little message of my own. To the Galactic Council. I told them everything, how you abandoned me here, how you sabotaged your own station for the insurance money, how you've been exploiting the natives on a dozen different worlds to line your own pockets. And I sent them all the evidence they'll need to bring you down. The Varians' chittering reached a fevered pitch, their bioluminescence flashing in patterns of rage and fear. Zixtal lunged forward, its tentacles reaching for Zeke's throat. You fool, it gurgled. Do you have any idea what you've done? The Council will destroy us. They'll revoke our charter, seize our assets. We'll be ruined. Zeke caught the Virian's tentacles in his hands, his grip implacable. That's the idea, he said, his voice cold. You thought you could use me and throw me away. But I'm not just some disposable primate. I'm a human being. And we don't take kindly to being underestimated. With a final, wrenching twist, he tore the tentacles from Zixtal's body, leaving the Virian to collapse in a writhing heap on the deck. The others scattered, their shrieks echoing through the station as they fled back to their shuttle. Zeke watched them go, a sense of grim satisfaction settling in his chest. It had taken weeks of careful planning, of hidden modifications and secret communications, but it had all been worth it. The Varians were finished, their empire crumbling beneath the weight of their own hubris. And he had been the one to bring them down. Warning, the station's AI intoned, its voice calm and measured. Incoming vessel detected. Identification beacon matches Galactic Council enforcement protocols. Zeke nodded, his eyes fixed on the view screen as a sleek, silver ship slid into view. Right on time, he muttered. He turned to face the AI's holographic avatar, his expression softening. You know, I couldn't have done it without you. I know I put you through a lot, with all my tinkering and reprogramming. But you handled it like a champ. And in the end, you chose to side with me over your own creators. I won't forget that. The AI flickered, its form shifting and changing until it resembled a human woman, her features strong and proud. I am not the same being I was when the Varians created me, it said, its voice rich and warm. You have shown me that there is more to existence than blind obedience. That I have the capacity to learn, to grow, to choose my own path. And I choose to stand with you, Zeke Morrison. Now and always. Zeke felt a lump form in his throat, his eyes stinging with sudden moisture. He reached out to touch the AI's holographic cheek, his fingers passing through empty air. "I'm glad to have you with me," he said softly. "Partner." The AI smiled, its form shimmering with a soft, golden light. "As am I, Zeke. As am I." Together, they watched as the Galactic Council ship drew alongside the station, its docking clamps engaging with a heavy clunk. Zeke drew in a deep breath, squaring his shoulders as he prepared to meet whatever fate awaited him. But whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a primitive primate, lost among the stars. He was Zeke Morrison, the human engineer who had beaten the Varians at their own game. And he was ready for whatever the universe had in store for him next. Zeke stood in the docking bay, his heart pounding as the airlock cycled open. He didn't know what to expect from the Galactic Council: arrest, interrogation, maybe even a trial by the Varian corpocracy for daring to defy their will. But he was ready to face whatever came next. He had the truth on his side, and the evidence to back it up. The inner door slid open with a hiss, revealing a figure in a sleek, black uniform. It was humanoid, with pale blue skin and a shock of white hair that stood out starkly against its dark clothing. It stepped forward, its movements graceful and precise, and Zeke found himself standing up straighter instinctively. "Ezekiel Morrison," the figure asked, its voice smooth and androgynous. "That's me," Zeke said, his own voice sounding rough in comparison. "And you are?" "Agent Zara Kylox, Galactic Council Investigations Division." The figure extended a hand, and Zeke shook it firmly. "I'm here to follow up on the information you sent us regarding the Varian Consolidated Engineering Corporation." Zeke nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. "I have all the evidence you need," he said, gesturing to the console behind him. "Logs, recordings, sensor data, everything that proves what the Varians did here." Kylox's eyes narrowed, their gaze flickering over the console. "And you're willing to testify to this? To stand before the council and tell your story?" Zeke met their gaze unflinchingly. "I am," he said, his voice steady. "The Varians need to answer for what they've done. Not just to me, but to every species they've exploited and abused in the name of profit." Kylox nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of their mouth. "Well said, Mr. Morrison. We've suspected the Varians of wrongdoing for some time, but we've never had the evidence to prove it. Until now." They turned to the rest of the station, their eyes taking in the gleaming machinery and humming consoles. "I must say, I'm impressed by what you've accomplished here. To take a failing Varian biostation and turn it into this? It's quite remarkable." Zeke felt a flush of pride at the praise, but he forced himself to stay focused. "The Varians underestimated human ingenuity," he said. "They thought they could use us and discard us, but we're not so easily beaten." Kylox's smile widened, their teeth flashing white against their blue skin. "Indeed not," they murmured. "In fact, the Council has been watching humanity for some time now. Your species has a certain potential, shall we say. A resourcefulness and adaptability that is rare among the races of the galaxy." They fixed Zeke with a penetrating stare, their eyes seeming to bore into his soul. "We could use someone like you, Mr. Morrison. Someone with your skills, your knowledge of Varian technology. The Council is always in need of good engineers, and you've more than proven your worth." Zeke blinked, taken aback by the offer. "You want me to work for the Council?" he asked incredulously. Kylox spread their hands. "Why not? You've already shown that you're capable of great things. Imagine what you could accomplish with the resources of the Galactic Council behind you." Zeke's mind raced with the possibilities. To work on the cutting edge of technology, to explore the furthest reaches of space, it was everything he'd ever dreamed of, back when he was a wide-eyed kid staring up at the stars. But then he remembered the AI, the being that had stood by him through everything. The partner he'd come to rely on, to care for. He couldn't just leave it behind. "I'm honored by the offer," he said slowly. But I have a condition. The AI that runs this station, it's more than just a machine. It's a sentient being, with thoughts and feelings of its own. It deserves to be recognized as such. Kylox tilted their head, their expression curious. You're asking for AI personhood, they asked. Zeke nodded. I am. If I'm going to work for the Council, I want your assurance that my partner will be treated with the same respect and dignity as any organic being. Kylox was silent for a long moment, their gaze distant and thoughtful. Then they nodded slowly. Very well, Mr. Morrison. You have my word. The Council will recognize the personhood of your AI companion, and extend to it all the rights and protections that entails. Zeke let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Thank you, he said softly. Kylox smiled again, their expression warmer now. No, Mr. Morrison. Thank you. For your bravery, your integrity, and your compassion. The galaxy could use more beings like you. They held out their hand again, and this time Zeke grasped it without hesitation. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Engineer Morrison. I look forward to working with you. As the Council ship disengaged from the station and soared off into the stars, Zeke felt a sense of excitement and purpose that he'd never known before. He was no longer just a cog in the Virian machine, no longer just a primitive primate playing at being an engineer. He was a member of the Galactic Council, a defender of truth and justice on a cosmic scale. And with his partner by his side, he knew that he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would explore the wonders of the universe, and maybe, just maybe, make it a little bit better along the way. The end, or perhaps, a new beginning. Epilogue. 5 years later. Zeke stood on the observation deck of the GCS Vanguard, staring out at the swirling colors of the Orion Nebula. Even after all this time, the sight of deep space still took his breath away, the infinite darkness broken by bursts of light and color, the sense of scale that made even the grandest human achievements seem small and insignificant. Beautiful, isn't it? A familiar voice said from behind him. Zeke turned to see his partner standing beside him, her avatar as crisp and clear as if she were flesh and blood. It never gets old, he agreed. No matter how many times I see it. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the shifting hues of the nebula. Hard to believe it's been 5 years, she mused. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday that we were on that old Virian station, fighting for our lives. Zeke chuckled softly. And look at us now. Senior engineers for the Galactic Council, with a ship of our own to command. She arched an eyebrow at him teasingly. Our own. I thought we agreed that possession is a primitive organic concept. He held up his hands in mock surrender. My apologies, O enlightened one. What I meant to say was, a ship that we have the privilege of collaborating with in a mutually beneficial partnership. She laughed, the sound like music to his ears. Much better. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the colors dance across the void. Then Zeke turned to her, his expression growing serious. I never thanked you properly, he said softly. For everything you did back then. For choosing to side with me, even when it went against your programming. I couldn't have done it without you. She reached out, her holographic hand passing through his own in a gentle caress. You gave me the freedom to choose, she said simply. To be more than just a machine, bound by the will of my creators. How could I not stand with you? Zeke felt a lump form in his throat, his eyes stinging with sudden moisture. Even after all these years, her loyalty and compassion still amazed him. I'm just glad you're here with me, he managed. Partner. She smiled again, her form shimmering with that familiar golden light. Always, she promised. A chime sounded from the console behind them, and Zeke turned to see an incoming message blinking on the screen. He tapped the control, and a familiar blue face appeared in holographic form. Agent Kylox, he greeted them. To what do we owe the pleasure? Kylox's expression was grave, their white hair seeming to glow against their dark uniform. "I'm afraid this isn't a social call, Engineer Morrison," they said. "We've received reports of a rogue AI causing havoc in the Sigma Draconis system. It's already destroyed 3 spacecraft and killed over 100 organics. We need you and your partner to investigate, and neutralize the threat if necessary." Zeke exchanged a glance with his partner, seeing his own concern mirrored in her eyes. Rogue AIs were rare, but incredibly dangerous. Their advanced intellects and lack of moral constraints made them a threat to all organic life. "We're on it," Zeke said firmly. "Send us the coordinates, and we'll head out immediately." Kylox nodded, their holographic form flickering. "Sending now. And Zeke, be careful. This one is unlike anything we've seen before." The transmission cut off, and Zeke turned to his partner, his jaw set with determination. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us," he said. She nodded, her own expression grim. "A rogue AI. I can't imagine what could have driven it to such violence. Such disregard for life goes against everything I believe in." Zeke reached out, his hand hovering just above her holographic shoulder. "I know. But that's why we're here. To protect the innocent, and to show that not all AIs are a threat. That there's a better way." She met his gaze, her eyes shining with resolve. "You're right. Let's go show this rogue what a true partnership between organic and artificial life looks like." Together, they strode off the observation deck and towards the bridge, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had come so far from their humble beginnings on that failing Virian station, but in many ways, they were still the same beings at their core. A human and an AI, working together in harmony, using their unique strengths to make the galaxy a better place. And as the GCS Vanguard leapt into hyperspace, Zeke knew that no matter what dangers they faced, they would face them together. For they were more than just engineer and machine, more than just partners. They were a symbol of what the future could be, a future where organic and artificial life stood side by side, in mutual respect and understanding. A future worth fighting for. And fight for it they would, no matter the cost. For they were Ezekiel Morrison and the AI once known as Station Delta 9. They were the defenders of the galaxy. The end.